So last week I spent a couple hours filming and editing and making sure the lighting and the mics were right and all that good stuff so I could tell you guys my story. But after I was done with it, I just had this feeling that it wasn't the one I needed to share. So I actually filmed my story on my iPhone 2 years ago, real raw, uncut, nothing left out. And last night as I was laying in bed, I had the feeling that was the story I needed to share instead. It's a little bit longer, so feel free to push double speed on YouTube. But it's, like I said, it's the one I think I needed to share. And without further ado, here's my story. I've been feeling like I should share my story with chronic health for a while now. And I've been very nervous. I don't know why. It was just a very, very trying time for me. But so let me just start. My name's Aubrey. I'm now 29. I got sick back in 2011 when I was, what is that, like 19 or 20? And so let me just start from the beginning. When I was at Brigham Young University in Idaho, it was the winter semester of 2011. It was bitter cold in Idaho in the winter in Rexburg. So just before that, I signed up for like 1 or 2 8 a.m. classes. I don't know why. I know it's crazy. And every morning before that, I would set my alarm clock to like 6:30, and I would run up. It's probably like a fourth to half a mile up there in like bitter freezing cold. It was probably, I don't know what the temperature gets to, below 0. And I would run like 2 miles around the track every morning. And that was how I would start my day. And it was, I can't remember what month it was. I think it was February. I was doing my runs, and the next day, I set my alarm to wake up at 6:30, and I could not wake up. And I was like, okay, just this once, we'll skip it. So I went back to sleep, and then I woke up like right before my class was supposed to start, and I think I ended up being late for class that day. But that's when I noticed around that day I got a fever, and then I had a bad cough. I thought it was just kind of a cold type thing. Runny nose. My lips started getting swollen. I was getting chills, vomiting. Basically every sick symptom. And so I went to the doctor. They did a blood test. They ran tests for the flu, for strep, for all that stuff, and they're like, looks like it's just a virus, so let it run its course. So I just let it run its course. I was pretty much in bed for about a week. Just felt awful. Started getting behind on all my schoolwork, and then started getting a little stressed out about all of that. And went to the doctor a couple more times to check up, and they're like, oh, looks like your, I think it's white blood cell count was going down. It looks like you're starting to get better. So I was like, oh, awesome. So I went to class that next week, but I still just felt really tired and a little bit like not myself. But I kept going, and then like a week later, I just felt really bad. Just having constant headaches, and just like this chill would go down my spine. I don't even know how to explain it. It was not like you're scared of something type of chill. It was just like a weird like sickness pain almost. And I was just dizzy all the time. Every time I would walk to class, I'd have to sit down because I would get really dizzy. And like my heart was like racing all the time. Just my heartbeat was going really fast, which was a symptom of POTS, or I can't remember what the name is, the tachycardia one. And then I'd sit down and it would like calm down again. I'm like, what is going on with my body? So I went back to the doctor. They ran tests. They're like, well, everything looks good. Like, you should be fine. They're like, well, maybe you're just having panic attacks. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I don't feel panicky. I'm like, I just feel like my body's kind of doing weird things. And they're like, okay, well, everything's fine. So I went back again. Same kind of thing happened. Then I started, like, my memory was just really bad. Like, I couldn't retain things at school. I started falling asleep in class, which is like, yeah, that's normal. I actually never fell asleep in class before. I'm not trying to be like a goody two-shoes. I just never fell asleep in class. I wasn't tired. But I slept through, I remember like the next week, I slept through the entire class, and the kid sitting next to me had to wake me up at the end, and I was like, dude, the teacher like noticed you were sleeping the whole time, and I'm like, oh, dang it. So, that was kind of weird, and I just started getting worse and worse, and then I did start getting panic attacks. I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, this is really scary. I'm dizzy all the time. I'm getting like constant migraines. I just feel exhausted. Like, I couldn't even walk to class. Like, I had to sit down every couple feet to get to class. And then I started, a new thought came into my head, and they're like, well, you might just have a seasonal depression. And I was like, seasonal depression? What? And then I started becoming afraid of that. And it was almost like I had OCD. Like, anytime somebody would tell me something that scared me, it just got stuck in my brain. It felt like my brain was just super weak. And then I was like looking up symptoms of depression, and it said suicide and all these different things. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what if that's me? And what if I committed suicide? And what if all of those things? I'm like, I don't want to do any of those things, but they're telling me that that's what I am. And so it was really a scary time for me. So then eventually I did start becoming depressed because I was so afraid of becoming depressed. And I know this all sounds crazy. But that's just kind of the trail it went down. So my body was super weak. Oh, and I forgot to mention I was still throwing up all the time. On the way to class most every day, I would randomly just have to like run over to a garbage can and throw up. And so that was also weird. So they gave me like anti-nausea medication, to help me not be so dizzy. They told me to take ibuprofen for my muscle aches. And then they started trying out different antidepressants for my anxiety and now depression. And I was just terrified out of my mind. I remember one of my classes, like, I was so, like, my brain and my body just felt so weak. I had a great class for an anxious person to be taking at the time. I was taking I think it was a Middle Eastern Studies class, and they were talking about terrorism that week, and we watched a video on terrorism, and it was like, I think it was a documentary on two guys who were terrorists, and I just couldn't get those images out of my head, and it was so scary. And it wasn't like I was gonna do those things or anything. It was just I don't even know how to explain it. It was just really scary. Like, anything scary to me would get stuck in my head, and I'm almost embarrassed to like say this stuff because I sound like a crazy person. This doesn't happen anymore, and but I tell you all these things because I don't want people to feel shame when they're going through this crazy stuff in their life. So this all just kept happening. And I was trying to, like, my roommates knew something was going on, but I tried to just be like my happy-go-lucky self, like, but I got so weak that I couldn't be in social settings. My head just kind of felt tingly all the time. And just like, I just felt lightheaded all the time. And like my joints just ached, everything just hurt. And it was so scary to me because this was all so unlike me and so unlike my body and my brain. So I just kept going on, and I called my mom and my sister like every day, just bawling. And I tried to explain like there's something very wrong, and I'm afraid like I'm gonna have to be put into a psych ward or something, because like they tell me there's nothing physically wrong, so I must be crazy because there's like they can't explain anything. And my mom, it went on for about another week. I was at school, and then I just broke down and called my mom sobbing. I'm like, I can't do it. I'm literally having a panic attack like every hour, and it's so painful, and I can't sleep at night, and like I just keep throwing up all the time, and nobody believes me that there's something wrong. And I'm like, I swear I'm not anorexic. You can ask any of my roommates, any of my friends. I'm like, I eat all the time. So then my mom was like, okay, like, let's get you a flight home. We're gonna find you some doctors, and we're gonna figure out what's going on here. And at that point I was like, it's just seasonal depression. I just need to go home to sunny Texas, and I'll feel better. And so I ended up going home, and my teachers at BYU were awesome and just let me finish my schoolwork from home. And so I ended up seeing an internist, an infectious diseases doctor, like 2 naturopaths, a neurologist, psychiatrist, psychologist, OB, I think I saw a heart doctor. I forget what that's called. Just like over probably 15 doctors. I had an MRI, I had a CAT scan, I had a spinal tap, EKG, tons of blood tests, from like, they were curious about like lupus, MS, cancer. They even tested me for STDs. Everything came back negative, and I was like, okay, this is just how I am now, and I'm just gonna have to deal with it, because I know a lot of people develop anxiety disorders or depression in their early 20s, so maybe that's just what's happening to me. So I just tried to tough it out, and I was like, okay, well, if this is just how I am now, I'm gonna just have to learn how to deal with it. So they tried like, I don't know, 5 different antidepressants. None of them really worked. I ended up seeing a psychologist, and I talked to her for a little while, and she was like, do you have any like major trauma that you've gone through in life? And I'm like, not really. They're like, any childhood trauma? I'm like, no. They're like, did you have friends growing up? I was like, yeah, I always had friends. Like, I'm like, I don't really have a reason to be depressed or anxious. Like, none of this makes sense to me. And I remember her like looking at me in the eyes and being like, there's something physically going on with you. Because I told her about all my symptoms going on, and she was like, I don't believe that you're just anxious and depressed right now. She's like, there's something happening. And I was like, well, that's nice for somebody to tell me, because I have not really been hearing that. Most of the doctors I went to were extremely rude. One of them, I know they were just trying to do their job, and to be like really to help people, and I get it. If they thought I was making stuff up, it would be frustrating, but it was really hard for me. A few doctors, one of them told me I was just getting old. I was, I think, 20 at the time. And he's like, you just get tired as you get older, and sorry, that's just what's happening to you. And I was like, what? I'm like, I ran cross country in high school and did track and cheerleading, and like had unlimited energy, and now all of a sudden all this stuff is happening. I'm like, I don't think that's what's happening. But I remember getting in my car and just bawling after, because I'm like, okay, like I just need to give up, because I can't handle this constant people telling me that it's all in my head. So I remember I went to the neurologist. He's like the best neurologist in Houston, and they did like a brain scan, and I remember them saying that I think it was my cerebellum was like a teeny bit lower than like the average, and they're like, well, maybe that's causing your dizziness. And then the neurologist looked at it further, and he's like, no, it's really not that much lower. that can't really be what's causing it. So I had a glimmer of hope that maybe that's what it was, and then it ended up not being true. And it was just really a really hard thing. I remember just sitting in, like, going into my room in my closet and just bawling because it was so hard having nobody, not even the doctors who are supposed to be there to help you, believe you that there's something seriously going on. I went from being a really happy young girl who loved, like, being out with my friends and, like, being social and like being active and athletic, to not even being able to, like, walk to my car without having to, like, sit down for a minute. It was just insane. And so I really started losing hope, and just kind of, like I said before, just thought, maybe this is just who I am now, and I'm just anxious, and maybe I do need to get checked into a psych ward because I'm probably just hypochondriac or something, and I'm probably just making it all up. And I know that sounds like, okay, pity party, but after having that many doctors tell me that, it was hard to believe myself and to trust myself. So I remember I just prayed and prayed to Heavenly Father, and I was like, please just help me. Please just help me with, like, just help me to know I'm not crazy and that something will happen. And I remember kind of being at my wit's end, and I talked to this sweet lady in my church, and I confided in her. Like, I just kind of spilled my guts and told her everything, and she looked at me and said the same thing the psychiatrist did, and she said, there's something wrong. And she told me about this doctor in Houston who was, like, a super well-known doctor for people who, like, other doctors rejected. So I went, and I went to him, and she took me there. And she was such a sweetheart. And she actually, helped me with the whole thing. And I went to them, and they tested my hormones. Like, everything was kind of off. My hormones were off. My thyroid was off. There was just, like, a lot of things. I think my white blood cell count was either elevated or below average or something. So it was just, like, a lot of little things, which I didn't know what any of that meant. And so they put me on, like, bioidentical hormones and stuff, and I was like, well, I'm willing to try anything at this point. It ended up not really helping that much. Like, my energy was still super low, still felt anxious all the time, still randomly throwing up, still, my joints still hurt all the time. I was like, what the heck? And they told me if, like, the only people who don't heal from this treatment are people who have Lyme disease. And I was like, what's Lyme disease? And I was like, okay. And they're like, do you want us to test you for it just in case? And I was like, sure. So they tested me for it when they prescribed me everything. And so I went back to school with all that stuff, and I was taking everything. They put me on, like, took me off gluten, dairy, like, really minimize my diet, and to avoid, like, all the inflammation foods. And I was like, okay, well, give this a try. They called me, I guess, like, pretty soon after, with the results of the Lyme test, but I never got it. And then one day I was checking my email and saw this really old email from them saying Lyme test positive. And I just remember bawling and, like, what? And not for the reason you think. I was so happy that I wasn't making everything up. Sorry. It's so hard to have not even trusting yourself. And so I told my mom, and she called, like, every doctor around and tried to find the best Lyme doctor. And so when I went back to Houston for Christmas, I saw a Lyme doctor and she put me on antibiotics. And I was prescribed antibiotics, and I took them for about 3 or 4 years, and immediately, within like 2 weeks, my anxiety just kind of like it dissipated, and my like joint weakness, kind of everything started slowly going away, and I was like, this is too good to be true. Like, what? And within a couple months, things started coming back again. And the doctor told me that your body can get resistant to antibiotics after you've been taking them for too long. But she told me my Lyme was in a chronic state and that I'd probably had it for a long time, and that the virus probably just reacted it, because Lyme can be dormant for a long time, but when your body goes under a great deal of stress, it can come back from dormant. And with the cold and my sickness and everything else, apparently it reactivated, and it had been dormant in my body for I don't know how long. And they say with somebody with a really healthy immune system, it doesn't affect until later sometimes. So, so I went through that for a long time, and then met in Utah. I was like, well, I need to find a doctor out here that I can see while I'm out here. I met my husband just before that while I was really sick, and he was a sweetheart. We dated for like 2 years, and he dealt with everything I was going through with me. And then, so when we got married, I was still continuing to go through the journey. And I found a couple doctors out here, and most of them ended up being naturopaths. I learned that normal MDs only treat Lyme with antibiotics, and they run different tests, and it just ended up being really hard. So, long story short, went through a couple MDs and NDs, and finally found one recently. So I got diagnosed in like 2012 or 13. I think it's 2012 or 2013. I think it was the end of 2013. So it was about 2 years of going through my personal hell, basically, and then having that. So what I found out worked for me was I ended up having to get off antibiotics because I was getting resistant to most of them, and I just ended up getting flare-ups all the time. So then one of my most recent doctors did a test and was like, you have lots of parasites. And I was like, what? Like, they did a stool test on me back in 2011 with everything. And he's like, well, you have tons. And I'm like, okay. So I started taking like certain herbs from a company called Microbe Formulas that immediately started dispelling parasites. And I was still on antidepressants because I was too scared to get off of them at that point, because I was terrified of the depression and anxiety. But at that point, after about 4 or 5 months of dispelling parasites, I was able to get off the antidepressants, and it was amazing. Like, I felt like me again, and I continued to take those for about on and off for about a year and a half, and just continued to feel better and continued to see lots of crazy things coming out. Then after that was a huge part of it. Apparently Lyme can lie dormant in parasites in your intestines, and when they excrete their waste products, sometimes that bacteria and those viruses come out. So that was another huge part, was getting rid of those. Then after that, I cleansed out my liver, because apparently that's where your body detoxes everything. And I used a company called the Dr. Clark store, to help with that. And then I also did a kidney cleanse to help clear out my kidneys. And that helped a ton. I actually had to do like 3 liver cleanses. Some people have to do more than that. And then my kidneys also. And so another problem I had was my bladder was not urinating all the way. Like, it was still holding some of my waste. So I would have to go to the bathroom like every hour, sometimes every 30 minutes, especially if my bladder was full. And once I did the kidney cleanse, that went away. And like, there was like, it looked like tissue like stuff that came out of my kidneys. So I didn't have that bladder problem anymore, which was super crazy. And then, what else did I do? Parasites, liver, kidney. Oh, so this all sounds like super crazy stuff, but it totally worked for me. I had my wisdom teeth taken out when I was in like 8th grade, and I learned about something called cavitations, and that is when you have an infection in your jaw, and a lot of people with chronic illnesses or immune dysfunction or immune disorders get those after they get their wisdom teeth taken out or have had root canals. And there's not a lot of blood flow in your jaw, so that infection just kind of seeps into like your lymphs and everywhere. And I always got sick. Like, my limbs would get puffy probably every 4 months, like really puffy. And I could never figure out why. And then, so I got the cavitation surgery. I ended up having 4 really bad jaw infections, and my husband was in there, and he can tell you, like, it was black, where they scraped out the dead bone and put a new bone. And so all of those things, like, combined together helped to make my immune system much stronger. And then from there, it was just like helping to heal my cellular structure, healing my diet. I didn't really eat that well either, like the standard American diet. I started incorporating like more greens, more salads. I didn't go vegan or vegetarian or anything, but I tried to not eat meat with every meal and eat more like grass-fed meats, and just eat more fruits and vegetables and less processed foods. And doing all of those things really helped me a ton. And then just taking vitamins, and making sure I got the minerals that I needed. But it was a really crazy time for me, and now I can tell you I am on 0 medications. I don't struggle with anxiety or depression anymore. I'm on 0 medications. I don't really have achy joints anymore. No migraines, my energy still isn't 100%. I'm still on the road to recovery, but I would say I'm like 85% there. Which if you asked me back in 2011 or 2012 even, if I thought this was possible, I probably wouldn't say it was. But I just wanted to share this story because I know so many people are dealing with crazy chronic illnesses, and not having people believe them. I don't think there are a ton of hypochondriacs in the world, unless people went through crazy trauma and stuff when they were younger. But like, if you feel in your gut there is something going on, there might be, and you might just need to dig deeper and find the right doctors. But just clearing your body and detoxing your body of all the junk in it is really helpful. So if anybody is going through Lyme or going through a chronic illness thing, feel free to reach out to me and talk to me about it, because I know what it's like to go through that and not have people believe you. It's very terrifying. So, I just wanted to share that story with you. So I'm excited to continue this journey with you guys, because I still have a lot to learn. I am 180 of where I used to be, and so happy about that. I want to continue to learn how to maintain health and how to maintain health for my children and how to stay healthy and not just get healthy one time. Make sure that I continue this and teach other people how to. But I just wanted to tell you all my story before we moved forward so you could see kind of the depth of where I'm coming from. For me, parasites were a huge thing and clearing out all the toxins in my body.